Hello, my name is Ruthi Hanchett, and I am an adjunct professor at Vanguard University, where I teach on the topic of human trafficking, and I coach our Live to Free Student Club, which is a group of college students, and we go out to the university, the community around us, other youth, and help them respond to human trafficking. You know, I have been involved in the anti-trafficking movement for over 20 years now. I've served on the United Nations Non-Governmental Organization Committee on Violence Against Children, the UN Girls Education Initiative, and I've worked with vulnerable youth around the globe to help them understand their rights as well as how they can protect themselves and their peers against abuse and exploitation. And I'm also a mother of two little girls. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. So today, I want to talk about how we engage especially young children to prevent child sexual abuse. I'm going to focus on those early years, from birth to preteen years, where we lay that foundation of empowered kids and empowered parents in order to prevent child sexual abuse and exploitation. And I want to just start by acknowledging that this is hard stuff. It may be triggering of previous abuse, and there's probably not a family out there who hasn't been affected by child sexual abuse in some way. So I want to encourage you, please take care of yourself. If you need to pause, take a break, do that. And if this brings up some hard things, I encourage you to seek support as you work through those issues. But just because this is hard doesn't mean we need to be afraid. Today, we're going to be gaining the knowledge and the information and the skills we need to raise our kids from a place of empowerment rather than fear. You know, normally I teach on the topic of human trafficking, but over the last decade of teaching and training on this issue, I have become convinced that if we are going to prevent human trafficking, and especially sexual exploitation, we have to begin with the prevention of child sexual abuse. Because child sexual abuse is an epidemic. It has lifelong consequences. And these two issues of sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and child sexual abuse are very much related. The statistics on child sexual abuse are staggering. It's estimated that 1 in 10 children, boys and girls, will be sexually abused before they reach the age of 18. And usually, up to 85% of the time, it's by someone they know. So it's someone that the family trusts. It's another relative, mom's boyfriend, a coach, a church member, or even an older child like a cousin, a step-sibling, or a babysitter. In fact, estimates are up to 40% of child sexual abuse is committed by other minors. The point is, it's someone that they knew and should have protected them, but instead it's someone that hurt them. And it's not the stranger danger, creepy guy in a white van that comes and kidnaps kids out of parks that they warned me about when I was growing up. And it's not necessarily the kidnappers in Target that you sometimes hear about on social media these days. While those things may happen, they're not statistically typical. So it's not what we most need to be teaching our kids about and warning them so that they can be safe. Our children may not immediately fear or even try to get away from the person who may be the abuser, especially if they know them already. Abusers work really hard to build trust with children and their families. And perpetrators often work to convince the child that abuse is actually an expression of love or affection, and especially to keep it a secret. Children oftentimes feel great shame and guilt about the ways that they're manipulated, and that makes them afraid to then seek out help. But we have to remember, it is never the child's fault. And it is never too early for us to protect our children and empower them to know about and help prevent sexual abuse. And as we do that, as we talk to our kids about sexual abuse, we are actually preventing human trafficking, because there's a clear connection between child sexual abuse and sex trafficking. Multiple studies that we know of show that up to 80, even 90% of sex trafficking victims were victims or experienced child sexual abuse or incest before. Andrea Dworkin, who's a famous feminist thinker and writer, said that incest is boot camp for prostitution. And Rachel Lloyd, who is the founder of Girls Education and Mentoring Services, GEMS, and is also a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation herself. She's helped thousands of survivors, and she describes a continuum of child sexual abuse to sexual exploitation and commercial sexual exploitation of children. She talks about this cumulative process of associating love with sexual abuse, with the breaking down of boundaries, with the unequal power dynamics of typically men with children, boys and girls, and this conclusion of getting paid for what feels familiar. However, we must remember that this path to human trafficking is not inevitable. Children who have experienced abuse can heal, and they are resilient, but it is better to protect them from the beginning and prevent abuse. So I want to talk about the role of adults and children in this work. Adults, I want to say very clearly, it is the responsibility of adults, whether that's parents, caregivers, teachers, coaches, church leaders, elected leaders, all of the community working together. Adults are responsible to keep kids safe. We are responsible for creating protective environments around children and also for building positive assets, opportunities for them, and safety nets that keep them safe. Adults are also responsible for holding perpetrators, abusers accountable. We must put those protective structures around kids to keep them safe. And at the same time, we can also empower kids to be aware and to be partners with us adults as we work together to keep them safe. So it's really this balancing act between being careful not to put too much responsibility on a child or expect them to protect themselves against a skilled pedophile, because that is too big a burden for a child to bear, and it is never a child's fault when an adult abuses. But we can include children as partners in this process, as part of the team. We know we cannot be there 100% of the time, in real life or online, to protect our kids. So we need to empower them to know about their own rights, their boundaries, and have the confidence to speak up when those are violated. So as adults, our responsibility is first to educate ourselves. We need to learn about this issue. We need to learn about grooming, or the intentional, gradual process where abusers build a relationship with both the child and the parents or the caregivers to create trust and then eventually break down boundaries that leads to abuse. We need to learn about the signs of sexual abuse to recognize it if and when it happens. We need to learn about what to do if a child discloses, and we need to believe that child when they do, or if they do. We need to be vigilant, to pay attention and believe our kids when they tell us anything and act on it right away. We need to have these hard conversations. We need to be both awkward with our kids to talk about these things, but especially to other adults. We need to also be very clear and upfront with the other adults in our children's lives that we take their child protection very seriously. So what this means is when we go to someplace like checking out a new church, we ask to see the child protection policy. Or when we go check out a new preschool, we ask to see their child protection policy, and then we check to make sure it's actually implemented. We see what it looks like in real life. It means we talk to our babysitters. We talk to our relatives about these issues. We talk to our friends before any kind of slumber party or our kids go over to their home and then we're not there. It means that we talk to our kids' schools about child protection. And when we do this, it signals to the other adults, and especially to any predators, that someone is watching. Because abusers are less likely to have access to and try to abuse a child when she has that strong safety net around her. And listen, standing up to a predator and protecting a child from abuse is worth it. It is worth feeling awkward and uncomfortable having that conversation. It is worth the risk of being wrong. of saying something and maybe we were overreacting. It is worth that risk. It's worth upsetting people. It's worth losing a friendship. It's worth losing a relationship. It's worth breaking up a church. And it's even worth breaking up a marriage. Because our kids need to know that their safety is our top priority. And once we've done that work of learning and educating ourselves and the other adults around our children, we then need to educate our kids about body safety and boundaries. So empowering kids is really about giving them the knowledge, the language, and the tools. And it doesn't spoil their innocence, because if it's done developmentally appropriately, it actually protects it. It's our job as adults to give them accurate information that's not scary, but helps them to be allies and partners with us in this team that's working to protect them. And it's never too early to start laying this foundation. So from the beginning, when they're barely learning how to talk, right? When we're changing diapers or doing bath time, we need to talk about our bodies without shame. Nothing is unmentionable. Kids need to know that they have private parts and that they need to know the anatomically correct names of those private parts. So we don't use cutesy euphemism names, right? No wee-wees or vajayjays. Instead, we need to talk to our kids about what their body parts are called. And we need to tell them explicitly that they are the bosses of their bodies. So I'm going to demonstrate what this looks like. So this is what we can do with our very small children. We can talk to them and we can say things like, honey, I want to talk to you about private parts and how we are going to keep you safe. Your private parts are the parts of your body that are covered by your bathing suit. So for everybody, that's our bottoms. And for boys, that's a penis. For girls, it's a vulva and vagina. Now, you have the right to privacy, which means that no one is allowed to look, touch, or take pictures of your private parts or the inside of your mouth. And guess what? Everybody has private parts, but also everybody deserves privacy. So that means we don't look at, touch, or look at pictures of anyone else's private parts. And if anyone, even somebody we know, if anyone tries to do this or show you or touch in any way, you listen to your body and you say no really loud. And you use your best ninja skills to get away. And then you come tell mommy right away. Or you can tell any of the trusted adults that we've talked about, like daddy or grandma or Mrs. Jones. But you tell somebody that you trust. And even if you can't get away, you are never going to get in trouble. I will not be upset with you, honey. I will always listen to you. I will always believe you. And I will always help you. So that's my demonstration. But we need to get comfortable having these conversations multiple times, all the time with our children. We need to fake it until we can feel comfortable. Practice if you need to in front of your mirror. But we need to open up these conversations with our kids. We also need to explain to our kids that we don't keep secrets in our family, right? Secrets are the things that make us feel uncomfortable and alone. But surprises, now those are happy, and they always come up in the end, like a birthday present. We need to be teaching our kids these lifelong lessons about consent from the very beginning. So things like people should ask to have a hug or a kiss or a tickle, and kids have permission to say no, even if it might offend or hurt the adult. And they need to practice using that muscle of saying no. We all need practice using that muscle, right? So we can set the rules and we can give our kids choices. So we might say something like, pick a way to say goodbye to grandpa. And then we don't undermine that ability by saying things like, oh, grandpa doesn't mean it. Just give him a kiss. You don't want to hurt him, do you? Right? We don't want to give our kids the wrong message, that they should know that when adults ask, they have the right to say no. And if they feel uncomfortable in their body, we want them to listen to that. We want to teach our kids to listen to their body's natural warning signs. if they feel uncomfortable, if they have a upset stomach, racing heart, nervous, sweaty, that is their body's warning sign. That is helpful. And they need to ask for what they need. They need to trust their gut. And we want them to be able to stand up for themselves and be heard. Because standing up for yourself, asking for what you need, can be hard, right? We all know that, even as adults. Our kids need to know that they have a team of adults that will back them up, that will believe them and help them when they need help. And it's important that our kids have a team and can articulate 5 safe, trusted adults that they can go to if they've experienced grooming, abuse, their early warning signs of their body discomfort, or even just a problem they can't handle on their own. And 5 is a great number because we have, 5 fingers. You can take this lesson home and practice with your kids. Ask them to identify the 5 people that make them feel safe, comfortable, that they can trust if they need some help, right? And 5 is great because if one doesn't respond right away and help, they go to the next and the next and the next until someone does. And kids shouldn't be in each other's safety net. But sometimes kids do disclose to one another. And so if our kids know the body boundaries and that we don't keep secrets and they have that strong adult connection, they can actually come to us and we can be an advocate for the kid that's in need. One of my best friends taught her kids about body safety and boundaries. So when a little boy shared with her son, Jack, that he was being abused, Jack was then able to go to his mom and explain what was happening. And my friend had to have that awkward conversation to her friend and say, hey, listen, I think maybe your son's experiencing abuse. But that saved that little boy from abuse. So we as adults want to be on our own kids' safety teams to build their protection network. But we also want to invest in the lives of other kids, especially those that may not have as many safe adults in their lives, so that all kids have as many safe adults as possible. The last topic I want to cover is pornography. Now, we all know that access to porn is now so much easier than it used to be. And even when we don't intend it, it often finds us, right? And during the COVID-19 pandemic, so many of us lived online. My kids were on tablets all of last year. It's so pervasive. It's so common. I mean, we see toddlers holding their parents' phones all the time. And I'm not judging. We've all done it, right? So we have to talk about pornography and the harm it causes with our kids. Small children typically view pornography accidentally at home by clicking on a link or mistyping even a Google search. The average age that children are now seeing pornography for the first time online is 11, and that is trending down. But the problem is kids are getting their sexual education from porn. It's not romantic lovemaking or even sex-positive, pleasureful kind of stuff. It really is misogynistic, abusive, violent, degrading materials. And it's shaping the way our kids see their own bodies, the way they view others' bodies, the way they think about sex and relationships. And it oftentimes leads to addiction and depression, both in boys and girls. And porn is also a grooming tool that's used by predators to both desensitize and instruct and entice children into abusive behaviors. And it also is used to create silence and shame around that behavior. So we adults are responsible to do our very best to prevent our children from seeing pornography. There are all kinds of filters, apps, and tools that are available now, some for free and some for purchase, that can really help us do that job well. But we also have to prepare our kids for if and when they do see it, or when a friend offers to show it to them, or they stumble upon it accidentally. We need to talk about the harm that pornography causes, how it shapes the brain, and how those images are oftentimes very hard to get out, even if we want to. How it can become addicting, leaving us wanting more, but also feeling like the things that used to bring us happiness really don't work anymore. We need to talk about how what they see on the screen is usually not a mutual, loving, respectful sexual relationship. And we need to talk about how there is a real person on the other side of the screen, and how sometimes they are hurt, physically, emotionally, they're treated poorly, and they may not even want to be doing what they're doing. Because we know from studies of women who are in sexual exploitation that when they are in that situation, they are oftentimes forced to make pornography as well. So most of the sex trafficking victims report that they actually were forced to make pornography, which may then be consumed even by our kids online. We need to talk about all of these things, these harms, but we also need to talk about the fact that feeling curious and even having a natural physiological response to the things that they see is totally normal. However, it does not mean they should keep looking. So we need to talk about what they do when they see it. That they, number one, should recognize it, to know that it's pornography and it is not appropriate for kids. Next, they need to shut it down. Close their eyes, click it off, shut the screen, push it down. They need to step away from that porn. Then they need to come and tell their trusted adult. They're 5, right? One of their 5 at least, so they can have help. This book on the screen, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, is a great resource for starting this conversation. This is aimed for elementary age kids. There's a junior version for even littler ones. Because we need to talk to our kids, and they need to know about these issues. They also need to know that they will not get in trouble for accidentally seeing porn or even seeking it out and then seeking our help to help them deal with that from a trusted adult. I'm a big fan of children's books as a way of starting conversations. I think literature like these helps start important conversations and create space for kids to ask questions that they may not normally have thought of. And kids usually absorb and listen to a lot more information in the form of a story than a lecture from a parent. So these are a few that I recommend for very young ages for starting these conversations. I'm also going to share a list of resources that I've used both in building this talk and I think are great for continuing this conversation, learning more, and even purchasing some of those books. Empowering our kids is really about an ongoing conversation. It's about communication and connection with our children. It's an ongoing conversation that evolves from birth to adulthoods. And at every developmental stage, we need to continually be talking about, modeling, and practicing protective behavior. So from the start, when our kids are very little, when they're just born, we're modeling loving, appropriate touch. And then we talk about private parts using anatomically correct terms and discussing boundaries. And our goal is that nothing is unmentionable. We normalize and remove the shame for conversations about our bodies, but we know our boundaries and we have the language to talk about it. And as they grow, we talk about safe adults, we talk about healthy relationships and how to get help when we need it. We teach them to listen to their bodies, to know their warning signs, to trust their gut, and to exercise the power of saying no. But this is not a one and done conversation, right? We don't do it once, say, okay, I did my job, they're smart, they got it. No, it's an evolving conversation. We continually evolve and pick up throughout their lifetime. So as they go off to elementary school and they're away from us more, again, we regularly check in. We know the child protection measures of the school, of the sports programs, the after-school programs. We make sure they're in place, and we continually follow up and check. We look for signs of grooming, of risk. We put those other adults on notice and include them in the team as much as possible. We let our kids know that we will always trust them and believe them, and they've got our support no matter what. And as they demonstrate their freedom, we give them safe places to fall, right? We encourage them that sometimes when they fail, they can also learn from that. We don't shame them or punish them excessively when they seek our help. So we say things like, you may feel embarrassed, but I'm really glad you told me. And we encourage them then as they enter into the preteen years to talk about healthy relationships, what consent looks like, what their value and worth is in a romantic relationship. We also talk about the risks of the internet, sexting and grooming and online pornography. We talk about online gaming and the risks that are there. We talk about a smart kid's approach to social media. And as they grow, They're learning the skills to protect themselves, but also to protect their peers. And we know, and we build in them this idea that there are no secrets they need to keep, that we will always be there to support them, and we are even protecting their peers in that process too. Because our kids know they can always come to us for help, even if it's help for a friend. Our kids need to know that they deserve to be safe, that we will do whatever it takes to protect them. As one mama told me once, no relationship matters to me more than you. So I want to encourage you to start today. To start now, whatever age your kids are. It's never too early and it's never too late to start this conversation. Because ultimately, our kids need to know that they have infinite worth, that they are deeply loved. And if anyone ever treats them as if this isn't so, we want them to recognize it and to immediately reject it. And this is a hard lesson. We are all still learning, but it is our task as parents, and we can do it, and it's worth it. Thank you.